What mysterious thing happened to you that you still can't explain? When I was taking care of my dad, we used to eat hot dogs whenever I was too tired to cook. One night I got home, and as I was turning the stove on, I remembered we'd run out of buns. I double-checked both the fridge and the pantry, but there were none. We were completely out. So I made clam chowder and made a note to get more buns the next day. I got up at 6 the next morning and went downstairs to start breakfast, and there on the countertop, by itself, presented as if a gift, was a brand new unopened bag of hot dog buns. Dad and I had both slept through the night, so it would seem at some point between midnight and 6 a.m., a bag of hot dog buns just materialized on the counter from the void. I once was changing pants in my room before work and took off my belt. After putting on my other pair of pants, I went to put my belt back on, but the belt was gone. No one else was in the room, and I spent a good 10 minutes looking for it, as I had simply set it on the floor. It's been 10 years, and I've never seen that belt again. Had my wedding ring fall off of my finger while I had my hand dangling out of a car window while driving. Very upsetting to arrive at the hotel I was staying at to realize it had slipped off. Wasn't in my pockets or in the car anywhere. Checked the floorboards, under the seats, console. I even checked the trunk, and figured it was probably laying on the side of the road somewhere along a 60-mile stretch of interstate. But I was exhausted. It had been a very stressful day of travel. I checked into my hotel room, pushed my suitcase just inside the door of my room, and passed out on the nearest bed. Didn't even stop in the bathroom to pee, or bother to get undressed or take off my shoes. Just laid down on top of the hotel bed, went straight to sleep. Woke up the next morning, and sat up looking at my ring finger, now minus a wedding band. I saw a glint of light on the desk by the window on the far side of the room. I'd been so tired the night before, I hadn't even closed the curtains, so the sunlight was pouring in. I got up and walked over to the desk to see what it was. It was my wedding ring sitting by itself on the desktop. I must have stared at it for a solid minute, trying to work out how it got there. I didn't have it when I came into the room, and I up until that minute hadn't even been on that side of the room. Still can't explain how it got there. I was on the periphery of this one, but it's still weird and unexplained. Anyway, I got a call from my wife while I was at work one morning. She was an RN and worked nights, so getting a call when she should have been fast asleep was unusual. She told me she had had a terrible dream that she couldn't remember, but something awful had happened to a member of my friend Dave's, obligatory not his real name, family, and that I should call him at once and tell him to check on his family. Now my wife was sort the nexus of a lot of weird stuff, so I didn't bother arguing with her, but just called Dave and let him know. He was a co-worker but had the day off and assured me that everyone in his family, wife and 2 grandkids he was raising, were just fine, and to thank my wife for her concern. I called my wife back to let her know, and she just said, "No, something's wrong." I found out the next day that about half an hour after I called him, Dave got a call from his brother in Florida to tell him that Dave's son, father of the 2 kids Dave was raising, had unalived himself. The son had been a junkie, but had been clean for quite some time and living with Dave's brother. He'd been clean for so long and doing so well that the brother and his wife felt confident enough to leave him alone while they went on vacation. While they were gone, the son relapsed and basically emptied the house of everything he could sell to fuel his addiction purchases. The day his uncle and his wife were to come home, he unalived himself out of shame. How my wife, who had only met Dave once or twice and had never met any member of his family, had known something was wrong, still baffles me. 2017, my wife, a good friend of ours, and myself were walking in a small fishing village in the northeast of Iceland. It was a small town, but no one was out that night. We were talking and walked by a dock. My wife leaned over to peer into the water. At that moment, a creature roughly 3-4 feet long with a splayed tail and dragonfly-like features flew into her face. She screamed, and it disappeared into the dark of night. No creature like that lives in Iceland. If we all weren't there, we wouldn't believe it. Still have no idea what to make of it. The next day, an Icelander told us it was a troll, but I think he was messing with us. I had just finished replacing all the burned-out bulbs in my rented condo. I was talking to my wife and said, "But when the one above the stairwell goes out, I'll call maintenance for that, 'cause I'm not climbing up there." We then looked at that specific light, and at that moment, it burned out. This was like 5 years ago, and we still talk about it. I heard a voice, not with my ears, but also not in my head, that said, "You don't have to go home." This was as I was walking home, and for some reason, it just woke something in me. I turned around and walked away. Slept on the streets for a couple of weeks before being taken into foster care. That is how I left my abusive family. I just decided in that moment to not go home, and that was that. Angel, higher self, hallucination, I have no explanation. One morning I met a couple on the east side of the state in City A. It was a holiday. They were from City B in the middle of the state, and I lived in City C on the west side. We were all visiting a landmark that day. At the time, we did not discuss any of these details about where we were visiting from. Several hours later, I was back in City C, about to have the holiday menu at a local restaurant, and I look up, and there's that same couple, also about to eat. Totally by chance, we had made reservations for the same time at the same restaurant, days, weeks ahead of time, left the same landmark on the other side of the state around the same time, and drove 250 miles to eat at the same restaurant. Several years ago, I was having a hard time with life. My mom had recently died, my dog had recently died, and I may have been going through some sort of midlife crisis. I decided to try meditation to try to get a grip on everything, but I had no idea how to meditate. Still don't. So I found a guided meditation on YouTube. The video was pretty typical. Get comfortable, focus on breathing, blah, blah, blah. Then, he says, I want you to focus on the memory of your best day. Immediately, I remembered my best day. It was the summer after I graduated from high school. I had no adult plan and made a spur-of-the-moment decision to take a road trip. I had quite a bit of money from all the graduation gifts. My mom was not on board. She said there was no way she would allow an 18-year-old girl to drive around the US on her own. We were arguing about it, and the friend of my stepbrother overheard. He offered to go with me. We talked about it for weeks, and begrudgingly, my mom gave permission. The first few days were awkward. I knew this boy, but didn't really know him. But with nothing else to do while driving, we talked about everything. We had so much more in common than I had previously realized. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, we became friends. The specific memory during the guided meditation was of the two of us sitting in a diner. We sitting across from each other in a booth. I can perfectly remember how the sunlight reflected off his hair, and in that moment, I was in love with being alive. But here's the thing, that never happened. None of it. I didn't go on a road trip. I never became friends with this person. When the video told me to remember my favorite memory, the diner scene popped in my head, and I somehow knew the backstory. It was one of the strangest things I've ever experienced. I know it sounds like I just made up an imaginary story, but it didn't feel like a made-up story. It was a memory. I wasn't daydreaming, I was remembering. I was shoving a cut of rail cars over a crossing. Pickup truck ran the crossing, around the crossing arms, and got hit by the rear car. After the truck came to a stop, I saw a man wearing white get out of the passenger side, and then saw the driver get out. I assumed they were going to switch seats for some reason. Drunk, no insurance, whatever. When the police arrived, I walked down to the crossing to give them my information. I asked if the driver and passenger were okay, and they informed me that there was no passenger, luckily. That's when I looked at the truck and saw that the passenger door was completely smashed into the cab where the knuckle hit it square on. I asked my conductor, who was watching the shove, if he saw a passenger, and he told me that there was only the driver. When I was in middle school getting ready in the bathroom, I felt this random urge to look behind me at the door frame. I glanced up in the mirror, and then I whipped my head around. I can't prove what I saw, and I know our minds like to play tricks on us, and I was in a super bad place mentally at this time. But a completely black spirit or shadow was staring at me with red beaming eyes, a hefty size. It looked like a big fat shadow man with red eyes peeking at me from the doorframe. And when I turned around, it quickly hid back behind the wall of the hallway. I swung the bathroom door closed so fast, and I was so utterly shocked and speechless, I didn't say anything to my parents, and I just casually continued my routine. Then, I mentioned it to my friends, and they were just as confused. I still cannot explain it, but I remember it so vividly. Every time I think about the way this thing stared at me, I literally get mild chills, and my heart races or my eyes water. I swear this ain't no stupid BS Reddit horror short story. I saw it. The way the outline of its body was wispy like black smoke, and its bright red eyes, the way it swiftly hid behind the wall. It's crazy. I never ever experienced anything like that again, even at my lowest point. I don't know what the hell that was, but it still haunts me to this day. I just can never forget it. When I was like 12, our power flickered on and off repeatedly one night, and all the lights turned blue and made the weirdest electrical screaming sound I've ever heard in my life. It was also happening at the neighbors across the street. It lasted about 20 minutes before everything went back to normal. My grandma was hysterical and threw me into the tub, I'm not sure why, and Grandpa went outside to investigate. After a long time he came in, reassured my grandma it was just a downed power pole down the road and people were already there, and sent us off to bed. However, he didn't go back to bed and sat downstairs watching the door all night with his shotgun without sleeping. He admitted several years later that he actually had no idea WTF that was, and there was no pole. Story starts a similar way to some other stories in here. Was getting ready for school one morning in about 5th grade, put my socks on my chair, turned around to put on a shirt, turned back to chair, no more socks. Weird, but whatever, I don't have time to question it. I grab another pair and head to school. The real weird part comes 5 years later. I'm 15. There's a big family dinner at my house. Dad decides to get fancy and break out the cloth napkins from our dining room closet that we absolutely never open. One of my cousins opens her napkin, which had been neatly folded and not touched since I was probably about 7. My parents don't host a lot of the family get-togethers, and sitting inside is one of my missing socks from 5th grade. No trace of the other one to this day, and I'm coming up on my 22nd birthday. Okay, this is a weird one. I was about to get on the feeder road to a busy highway. As I was approaching the intersection, I heard a booming male voice in the middle of my head, saying, "Check your tires before you get on the highway." It was not a voice I recognized, nor was the radio on. I did a hasty U-turn and went straight to a tire guy I have used in the past. As he was checking the front tires, he turned the wheel to reveal the tire so badly worn you could see the metal exposed wires. My tire guy said, "Good thing you came in here. If you would have gone on the highway, that tire would have blown and you could have been killed." I know this sounds like BS, but it happened. Nothing like that has ever happened to me before or since. No, I am not delusional or on any meds. As I said, I did not recognize that voice. It was so jarring that I did that U-turn without even thinking about it. I posted this before and people said angels or some other divine interference. I am not a religious guy or prone to do that sort of easy out explanation. Still mystified after 10 years. Not me, but my grandparents' story. My grandpa may have taken 5 sick days off his entire career. My grandma was a stay-at-home wife. After he retired, they both worked at a local flower shop. After about 15 years, he never once took a day off. One day they were getting ready for work, and he said he was feeling off and was going to stay home. She got in the car, turned it on, had a weird feeling, then decided to stay home as well since it wasn't like him. As she opened the door, she heard a thud, turned the corner and saw my grandpa bleeding from his ears. He had a massive brain aneurysm. She called 911 and they just so happened to be about 100 yards away from their house for whatever reason. Immediate surgery at the hospital. Doctor said the aneurysm is the type that if she would have been even a minute later and the ambulance wasn't right there, he 100% would have died. To this day she can't explain what told her to stay home, whether it be a divine intervention or being married for so long and knew something was wrong. But everything went so perfect for him to survive it. Interference. I am not a religious guy or prone to that sort of easy out explanation. Still mystified after 10 years. It was my first week of culinary school in 2012. I specifically remember it being end of day on Friday and putting my $1,000 brand new knife kit in my locker. I remember thinking to myself, should I bring it home? No, I already have so much stuff to carry on the bus. And I shut my locker, locked it, and left. Monday rolls around and I open up my locker getting my stuff for the next lab, and I notice my knife kit is gone. It had just disappeared. I was, and still am, completely baffled. I never found it. But I definitely, 100% know for a fact, I put that knife kit in my locker that Friday. I changed my locker without telling the college. There were rumors about security guards stealing knife kits and selling them, but I don't know. So weird. It's near Christmas of 1980. I'm a young teenager in the hospital, MD Anderson, who was going to be spending Christmas and New Year's in the hospital. So it was extra important to my dad that he got me whatever I wanted for Christmas. I wanted a memory game called Simon. It was one of the IT toys to have that Christmas. Impossible to get, but my dad was going to at least try. My dad is at Toys R Us, staring at the empty shelf where the Simon game would be if it were in stock. An employee with the name Matt on his name tag, attached to his Toys R Us vest, asked my dad if he could help him. My dad said he was looking for a Simon game. Matt simply said, "Follow me," and led my dad back to a warehouse area, and there was one Simon game by itself, and, without saying anything, picked it up, handed it to my dad, and walked away. My dad went to pay for it, and a confused cashier asked my dad, "Where did you get this, because this has been sold out for days?" My dad said Matt got it for me. The cashier, more confused now, said, "We don't have a Matt that works here." My dad described Matt and how he brought my dad to where it was. The cashier is now freaking out because no one with Matt's description works there. Both my dad and I had an extra special Christmas that year. 5 Christmases later, I wound up working at that same Toys R Us. Growing up, me and my brother were latchkey kids. I was in 7th grade, and my brother was like 2nd or 3rd grade, early 2000s. We would be home alone from the time we got home from school until our mom got home around 6 p.m. One day we were watching TV in our living, and there was a loud thud, like something fell in one of the bedrooms at the end of the hall. Then the pitter of feet running. I turned to look down the hall, and then running towards us was, I guess, like a goblin gnome Rumpelstiltskin thing. It honestly looked like a small 2-3 foot tall medieval peasant. I couldn't believe what I saw. It ran down the hall, past us, and then out our back door. I watched it the entire time. It's not like I saw it out of the corner of my eye. I remember looking over at my brother, and he said, "Did you see the little man?" And I immediately started crying, grabbed him, then our cordless house phone, and sat on the front porch to call our mom, and told her to come home. I've never had any paranormal experiences before or after that. We don't come from a religious family, or one that believes in that sort of stuff. We weren't watching anything scary. I really don't know. Me and my brother are both grown now, and will still tell that story sometimes camping, at parties. And I can tell most people don't believe us, but it's true. I've read of group shared hallucinations, but really don't know what else it could be. It follows. That's how I call this experience. When I was 20, I visited someone's apartment and had the most strange urge to splurt out, "There's an older man here, and he's very angry at you for something." He became very upset and started demanding, "Why are you saying that? How could you know that?" Honestly, he was becoming a bit scary. He was so upset. I apologized, as I had no idea why I would even say something so strange out of nowhere. I explained I got this weird urge and feeling when I looked in a specific corner of the room. When he calmed down, he explained that years ago he was married and his dying father-in-law told him, "If you ever hurt my daughter, I will haunt you forever." He did end up hurting the daughter, and a bad divorce ensued. Apparently ever since that, he has had this feeling of being followed. He actually even moved countries and still didn't feel safe. And I believe he said he feels especially uneasy about that specific corner. 100%, he had never told me any of this, not even a hint. I didn't know he used to be married, didn't know anything about his religion or spirituality, etc. His friends never mentioned any of this, so what came over me I have no idea. But there was an older man and he was angry,